Started out with $1 gambled with a man and I won me another. I bought me a gun and I robbed my brother. I'm bad, but I don't care, boys. I'm gonna be a millionaire.
Welcome to Book Time with Ryan. I am Ryan, and today I'll be talking about Kurt Eichenwald's The Informant. A true story. See, because it says it there. That's how you know it's true. The Informant. Dallas Morning News says, the thriller of the year, and it's all true. Somebody on the back, Portland, Oregonian, said, one of the most intriguing and nearly unbelievable nonfiction books in recent memory, a tangled tale worthy of John LeCarré. Anytime somebody says, this is like John LeCarré, I'm like, yeah, I'll read that. I am not going to get into all the facts of this book because it would be nearly impossible. This is to me, relatively long book. It has, before the notes and sources and stuff, 567 pages. It's from 2000. I've had this book for a while. I haven't seen the movie, but I had read Kurt Eichenwald's book about Enron called Conspiracy of Fools. It's one of my favorite books. And at some point I was like, you know what? I'm finally going to read this book. I did, and it was a page turner. Like, the stuff that happens in this book is not crazy, but the way it rolls out is at times very frustrating and believable. And it's nonfiction. This follows a case from the 1990s. I think the actual court date for some of this was 97 or 98. But most of the story is 91 to about 98, we'll say. And then written in 2000. We're following Mark Whitaker. Mark Whitaker works in biochemistry. He is a president of one of the business branches in lysine for Archer Daniels Midland. And lysine is an additive that helps animals grow, I think, fatter, so they can be processed into food. So you would see like lysine in feed, I guess it's called feed for chickens, to get them all nice and fat before you kill them and eat them. Major chemical, my understanding. It is mentioned in Jurassic Park. I've done a review of Jurassic Park. It's also brought up in The Lost World, which is kind of weird, because actually what's weird is when this is happening, that's around the time that Jurassic Park came out. So maybe lysine was the big thing people were talking about. I don't know. So we're looking at Mark Whitaker, and it centers really, most of the story is around, most of the events are around price fixing. Price fixing is where companies in the same industry would get together and they would say, hey, we're going to agree to sell our product at this price, and we'll agree to make this amount of the product. The idea being that they'll agree to prices that are higher than would naturally form through supply and demand, the market's pressures and competition. So you're not getting pure competition, and it's adding cost to your end users. I mean, to feed companies, but also to the people that are buying the food, because that extra cost is wrapped into production costs, which then are kind of passed on to the consumer. So you would be paying more if you're a farmer for feed because of this price fixing. But the way it starts is part of the production of lysine involves bugs, like bacteria, I guess. Some kind of, I think it's bacteria. And we start with notification within the company that there's been some kind of sabotage. Some kind of sabotage with chemical lysine production process. And the idea is that the Japanese competing firm did it. Eventually that's brought to the CIA, which then refers it to the FBI, and then the FBI gets involved, and it's determined that these allegations are coming through one of the presidents in the company, Mark Whitaker. And he gets really nervous when the FBI comes into it. So they're looking at, is there kind of sabotage? Is there any kind of corporate spying going on and stealing trade secrets? And the company wants it to go away. The FBI doesn't just walk away from it. They're like, no, we need more information. And Mark says, hey, what's even bigger than this is price fixing. This huge international multi-million-dollar price fixing scheme between some of the big lysine producers. And it probably involves other business lines too, like citric. And that's where it goes from there. And it just gets wilder and wilder because Mark keeps bringing all these allegations to it. Like his daughter is being targeted when she's away at school by some creepy Asian dude that's saying, tell your dad to shut up or whatever. It gets hard to believe, very hard to believe. Other parts of the FBI are brought in. This is happening in Illinois, in Decatur, Illinois. But other bureau units, other FBI units are brought in. Eventually, Department of Justice is brought in. And because of the reach of the company and the kind of money they're talking about, it gets to Washington and Maine Justice and FBI headquarters gets involved. And you start seeing a lot of conflict between different units within agencies, depending on if they're from Chicago or they're from Decatur, or they're from DC for the FBI, within the U.S. Attorney's Office for that area, or the fraud group and antitrust units. There's kind of jockeying for position and determining who should be able to do what in the investigations. Mark's considered a cooperating witness, but then it turns out that he's also been really just embezzling millions of dollars with fake invoices. That's it. Like it's crazy because the way Kurt did this, Eichenwald wrote this, and he talks about this at the afterword or something. He wrote it in a way that as you're reading it, you don't know what's true and what's fiction, because at the time people didn't know what was true and what was being made up, and you're gradually brought in on it. Like you are gradually clued into what is real and what is made up, and a lot of this made up stuff is coming from Mark Whitaker. He turns on his company. He turns on his, well, I mean, that was because of wrongdoing, but he turns on his friends. He turns on a new company he was working for. He turns on the FBI handlers that he had. He's eventually diagnosed. He tries to commit suicide twice throughout the book. He's diagnosed with bipolar. He's manic depressive, whatever. I don't know what those all mean, but he's having a really rough time. He's put on lithium by a psychiatrist, and he goes off of it, and he is just alleging all these things. When I said it was frustrating, it's frustrating when you see somebody who's so self-destructive and you're just like, dude, just shut up. Don't lie. You're needlessly creating more problems for yourself. Unforced errors. But the weirdest thing was, towards the end of it, you find out that Mark Whitaker was caught up in a Nigerian, I'm calling like Nigerian prince schemes. This is not email based. This is because they're faxing. This is early 90s, so we're talking payphones and faxes. There's not, let me just check my email and go through stuff on my smartphone. This is much older than that. So I don't know if it was called Nigerian prince scheme back then, but basically Mark was caught up in this scheme where he was sending money to a Nigerian oil company, And he got some of his friends involved to also throw in money. And then the Nigerians disappeared. They tracked that the money did go to Lagos, but then they disappeared. It's a scam. To recoup some of that money, Mark started embezzling, forging signatures, hiding money overseas in the Cayman Islands or Switzerland. So there's like this. It's weird because at first you're like, this is really organized, and then you feel like he's just stumbling into problem after problem, and then you find out that a lot of this is based off of a really stupid decision to send $250,000 or whatever to Nigeria because he was scammed. And then he, in turn, scammed others. So you have kind of the things that Mark Whitaker does in this, informing on the price fixing scheme, but then all this other stuff coming up that's handled through another unit for fraud, embezzlement, that kind of stuff. And then you have the company that's also in court for price fixing, especially the company and its second in command and a few other people. And there's tapes. There's lots of tapes that they're listening to. And eventually, Mark went to jail. A few executives from Archer Daniels Midland went to jail. The company admitted guilt and paid, I think it was $100 million, which was a lot then. And that's kind of how it ends. You actually, at the very end of it, you get Kurt Eichenwald talking about his process of interviewing Mark Whitaker, what his concerns were, how he got around some of the lies that he knew were probably coming, how would he verify, what was coming out, instead of just repeating lies. It was a book that I would hit it at 20 to 40 pages at a time. Like, it would just get so interesting that I was thinking, I wonder what's going to happen next. And he did a good job, Kurt, of jumping around between what was happening and then eventually leading you to the final conclusion with all these separate threads coming together. And it was neat. Living outside of DC, it was pretty interesting to hear about a lot of the places that were in this. Actually, I grew up in Tennessee, in Nashville, and there's a point where Mark Whitaker almost buys a house in Franklin, Tennessee, which is just south of where I lived, just outside of Nashville. So it was kind of interesting to see the different parts of DC that were mentioned. It was good. I don't know why I sat on this so long. I really thought this was more recent than the Enron book that I read, Conspiracy of Fools, that he wrote. But when I finally opened it, I realized that it's from 2000. So I don't know why I slept on this so long, but I really enjoyed it. You got to give real stories like this a try, because there are a lot of real stories out there, nonfiction books that are about real crime, that are just as exciting as fiction. But a lot of times it takes a really good author, a really good reporter, to be able to weave that into a story that you want to just keep looking at, that you don't want the summary of, but you want to experience it. And I think he did a good job of that. So I really liked it. The Informant, I gave it 5 stars. I'm going to watch the movie. I haven't ever seen the movie. And I am going to do a review. And I know once I do that review, 3 of the last 4 videos will have been book to movie reviews. But I've specifically held off on watching The Informant, which Matt Damon's in, until I read this book. And I'm going to try to watch that movie in the next few days and then come back and talk about that. But we'll see. I don't know how they're going to do it, because it was a fairly complex story, and sometimes it's hard to weave into a 2-hour or an hour and a half movie. Kind of saw that with Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Lots going on there. Not too hard to weave into a week miniseries, but a one-shot movie Sometimes there's a lot going on there, and they're going to have to cut corners. I don't know if they're going to do that, so that's what I want to see. That's going to be my next video, but I'm glad that I read this, and I really enjoyed it. Kirk Eichenwald's The Informant. Check it out. All right, have a good one. Bye.
How many of you